Hello everyone, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Today we will explore an emotional story about Trieu Khanh, a single father who comes to school to pick up his daughter Tieu Ly, only to realize that she is no longer there. As he searches everywhere in panic, a surprising truth is waiting for him back at home. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next videos. That afternoon began like any other quiet afternoon in Trieu Khanh's small world. After finishing the work he had promised himself to complete before sunset, he washed the dust from his hands, changed into a clean shirt, and walked toward Tieu Ly school with a tired but peaceful heart. For a single father like him, the walk to the school gate was never just a daily routine. It was the moment he looked forward to most. No matter how hard the day had been, no matter how many worries stayed on his shoulders, everything usually softened the second he saw his daughter run toward him. But when Trieu Khanh reached the school gate, something felt wrong. The children were already leaving in small groups. Some held their parents' hands, some laughed with friends near the roadside food stall. A few teachers stood by the gate, watching the last students go home. Trieu Khanh searched through the crowd once, then again, his eyes moving from one small figure to another. He expected to see Tieu Ly's familiar face, her little school bag, her quick steps toward him. She was not there. At first, he told himself she might still be inside. Maybe she had stayed behind to pack her books. Maybe she had gone to the restroom. Maybe she was talking to a teacher. He forced himself to stay calm and step closer to the gate, asking one of the teachers if Tieu Ly was still in the classroom. The teacher looked surprised, then checked quickly before telling him that Tieu Ly had already left. Trieu Khanh froze for a moment. Already left? With whom? The teacher was not completely sure. She only remembered that a young woman had come earlier and taken Tieu Ly away. The woman seemed familiar to the child, and Tieu Ly had not cried or resisted. Everything had looked normal from the outside, so no one thought there was a problem. Those words struck Trieu Khanh harder than he expected. A young woman. Tieu Ly knew her. She had taken the child before he arrived. His first thought was Huong. The name rose in his mind before he could stop it. Huong, Tieu Ly's mother, his ex-wife, the woman whose presence always carried old wounds and unanswered questions. Trieu Khanh did not want to think badly of her, but the suddenness of it made his chest tighten. If Huong had wanted to see Tieu Ly, why had she not told him first? Why had she not spoken to anyone properly? Why take the child without leaving even a simple message at the school gate? He had no phone to call, no quick way to ask where they had gone, and that made the fear inside him grow even faster. All he could do was ask people one by one, his voice becoming more urgent each time. He looked around the gate again, as if Tieu Ly might suddenly appear from behind another parent. But there was nothing. Just the sound of motorbikes passing, children laughing, and the school slowly emptying behind him. Trieu Khanh could no longer stand still. He hurried away from the gate and went straight toward Huong's house. His steps turned into a run before he even realized it. Along the road, his thoughts became a storm. He imagined Tieu Ly sitting somewhere confused. He imagined Huong taking her far away. He imagined every painful possibility a father could imagine when his child disappeared for even a few minutes. The more he tried to calm himself, the faster his heart beat. When he reached Huong's house, he called her name from outside. No answer. The door was closed. The yard looked quiet. There were no signs that Tieu Ly had been there. Trieu Khanh looked through the gate, called again, and waited, but the silence only deepened his fear. He asked a nearby neighbor if Huong had returned with a little girl. The neighbor shook her head and said she had not seen clearly, only that Huong had passed by earlier and left again in a hurry. Those few words made Trieu Khanh feel as if the ground under his feet had shifted. Huong had been nearby. Tieu Ly was not at school. No one knew exactly where they had gone. Trieu Khanh stood outside Huong's quiet house, breathing hard, trying to keep his fear from taking over. But every answer only made everything worse. The neighbor had not seen Tieu Ly clearly. The teacher had only said a young woman had taken his daughter from school. Huong had passed by in a hurry, but no one knew where she had gone. He turned away from the gate and searched every familiar road. He checked the small market, the old wall, and the bend under the banyan tree. Each place gave him the same empty answer. No little voice calling him, no small school bag, no sign of his daughter. The longer he searched, the heavier his fear became. Trieu Khanh had lived through hunger, debt, and lonely nights. But this fear was different. This was the fear of a father who suddenly could not protect the person he loved most. He kept telling himself Tieu Ly had gone with someone she knew. Huong was still her mother, but one question would not leave him alone. If it was only a simple visit, why had Huong taken Tieu Ly without saying a word? By the time Trieu Khanh turned back toward home, his legs felt weak. He walked fast, then slowed down, then walked fast again, searching every doorway. Then he heard a small laugh from the yard. It was Tieu Ly's laugh. Trieu Khanh stopped as if the whole world had frozen. He looked toward the house, and there she was. Tieu Ly was sitting safely in the front yard, moving small stones in the dirt with both hands. Beside her sat Hanh, the young woman who had been living with Trieu Khanh and Tieu Ly since the day he found her near the trash piles at the edge of the market. Hanh was slower than other people, simple in her thoughts, and easily frightened by harsh voices. After seeing her picking through garbage for food, Trieu Khanh had brought her home, given her a place to sleep, and treated her like family. Now Hanh was sitting close to Tieu Ly, guarding her in the only way she knew how. She kept one hand near Tieu Ly's shoulder, afraid the little girl might stand up and wander away. Her eyes were nervous, but she did not leave. For several seconds, Trieu Khanh could not speak. All the fear inside him broke apart at once. His shoulders dropped. His breath trembled. He rushed into the yard, knelt in front of Tieu Ly, and checked her face, hands, and clothes. When he saw that his daughter was safe, he pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. Han looked up with frightened eyes. In her simple, broken way, she explained that when she came back from collecting old bottles near the road, Tieu Ly was already sitting alone in the yard. Han did not know where Huong had gone. She only knew Tieu Ly should not be left by herself, so she sat down beside her. Trieu Khan's throat tightened. Han had probably been tired and hungry, but she had still stayed with his daughter. In that moment, the poor, forgotten girl he had brought home became the person who protected his family. Trieu Khanh gently asked Tieu Ly who had brought her home. Tieu Ly answered softly. It was Huong. Her mother had come to the school, taken her hand, and walked her back. Huong had not said much. She only told Tieu Ly to sit in the yard and wait for her father. Then she left quietly. Trieu Khanh listened in silence. Relief was still there, but it was tangled with anger, sadness, and uneasiness. Huong had brought their daughter home safely, yet the way she had done it felt like a warning. He thanked Han by placing a careful hand on her shoulder. Han lowered her head, still confused, but her fingers slowly relaxed. As evening settled around the small house, Trieu Khanh held Tieu Ly in one arm and looked down the road where Huong had disappeared. His daughter was safe. Han was safe. But the peace in his home no longer felt steady. Why had Huong come today? And what would she do next? One afternoon, Trieu Khanh goes to school to pick up his daughter Tieu Ly, but she is nowhere to be found. After asking around the school gate, he learns that a young woman had already taken her home. Worried that it might be Huong, his ex-wife, Trieu Khanh rushes to Huong's house and searches along the familiar roads. But he finds no sign of his daughter. Exhausted and terrified, he finally returns home, only to discover Tieu Ly safely playing in the yard with Han, the simple young woman he once rescued and brought home to care for. Tieu Ly explains that Huong walked her home and then quietly left. Trieu Khanh feels relieved, but also deeply uneasy, because Huong's sudden visit may be the beginning of something more complicated.